talking at the same time. Ain't nobody in this room but this little girl. And I call her little girl because I'm 42 years old and I got a 15-year-old son, so I can call her little girl. But ain't nobody in this room but this girl, and they're hearing these multiple voices coming out of this room. When they open the door, it's just her. And she says, well, I feel a lot better. And just walks past them and goes back out into the hallway. Well, they continue to have problems with this girl to the point to where he was able to help everyone in that building, every student, but this girl. And then it gets to the point to where she starts to turn her kind of anger on him. And he has to almost hurt her to defend himself. And he called me. He said, bro, I've known this guy a long time. He says, bro, I'm giving this contract up. And I'm like, why? He's like, because something's wrong in that building. Like there's something spiritually off around there. And he's like, I don't need that kind of mojo on my family, on me. It's not worth the money. I'm done with it. So he ends up leaving that contract, which I want to say was a $15,000 contract. It wasn't no little cheap contract, just for going twice a week, to go and counsel children and kind of teach them a little martial arts, you know what I'm saying? But he ends up leaving the contract alone because it was just too much going on in the building, too much negativity. And it was primarily all centered around this girl.
Sounds like she was possessed.
That's what it sounds like to me. That's what our conversation was about. Because you got to remember, there were times where he taught her martial arts. And one of the things that he told me, he's like, man, I've been teaching martial arts a long time. He said, a front kick is a front kick. A roundhouse is a roundhouse. He said, and most people who've never kicked or punched before, they don't really kick with any power. He was like, everybody kicked, but when she kicked, man, he was like, it was like 3 people hit the pad.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, it felt like 3 people kicked me. He was like, I've been kicked extremely hard. He was like, but this was harder than anything I've ever felt. This guy's fought in professional, tournaments where it's only no mask, just the gloves, 8-ounce gloves. He's like, dude, I've been kicked by professionals. I've never felt anything like that in my life. And he was like, something's up with her. And I was like, well, bro, you need to pray before you go over there, homie. He was like, well, I prayed, but, and this is before he decided he was going to leave it alone. He's like, but I don't know, man. I just might need to get out of there. And he left it alone because he said, man, it was just too much. He was having nightmares, all kind of crazy stuff. All that because he was going into a school where this girl was.
Well, it definitely sounds like being possessed because you mentioned different voices of another lady, a man, and then both at the same time. I mean, that, it definitely sounds like somebody was possessed.
Yeah, and that's a scary thing, man, and we'll probably talk about way more demonic stuff than I've ever talked about tonight, but I think what people do is people underestimate what really is what's going on around us and the powers that be. And I know for a fact that it's a bunch of crazy, weird stuff that goes on. And I think I need to start talking about it a little bit more because people need to know and understand that really exists. Because I think most people's experience with dark side and dark entities and is either a story they heard on YouTube or a movie they saw on TV, right? Or a movie they saw on Netflix or Hulu or one of those. And they don't realize that stuff is there. They need to be spiritually protected and have their spiritual armor on them to protect themselves so them and their family can be protected. Well, and also so they can be aware of minor changes in just like family members. If you got a teenage son who's always been one way, then all of a sudden he starts to shift and become another way, and his attitude changes overnight, then you need to start checking into that. Don't just write it off as, he's going through puberty. You know what I'm saying? Check into that and see what's going on with him. Pray over him.
Well, just think about this, Dark Waters. How many people have committed murders, done horrible things, right? That 1 minute they were totally sane, the next minute they're out, shooting people. And sometimes I just wonder if, if they got possessed. I mean, and then some of the people in the mental institutions, that maybe they're possessed, maybe they're normal, but they're not themselves because something is controlling them, taking them over, I should say.
I'm pretty sure there's a fair share of people like that in mental institutions, and I'm pretty sure there's a fair share of people like that walking down the street. But those aren't the people that really scare me, man. If I'm honest with you, those aren't the people that scare me. The people that really scare me are the people who are perfectly possessed. They know they're fine with it, and they're functional with it, and they're elevating themselves throughout life in different situations and positions of power. I mean, like, I told a story years ago about this attorney that had black eyes here locally. And that same attorney is now working as an assistant DA in the city of New Orleans. But when I first heard that story about him, he was just a regular attorney. Now he's an assistant DA. And the thought is that he's going to end up being the district attorney. And if he does become a district attorney, then I'll start talking about it. I'm not going to say his name or anything like that right now. But, I mean, that same guy, and anybody who's been listening to me for a while knows this story. That same guy is now an assistant district attorney.
Well,
and that guy had black eyeballs.
Well,
I mean, he literally had black eyes. And he's known. I've had 3 people tell me the story that they've seen this guy with black eyes.
Well, maybe
and we're talking about like black-eyed kids.
But maybe that's where he gets his power, by having people convicted of crimes that were maybe innocent, and let's face it. I mean, if somebody is a good actor, and that's what attorneys are. I hate to say it. If you're an attorney out there, I'm sorry, but I've known some real good friends that are attorneys, and they told me that, they studied acting, and that made a big difference of them winning cases or not. So, I mean, I think maybe that's where they maybe get their power, getting people convicted for murder or for robbery or what have you, they live off of that. I mean, that's something that they need.
Yeah, either that or, most people think of, like, people who sold themselves to the devil in the music industry, because there's ultimate, tale after tale after tale of somebody who sold their soul for music, to get a music career. But think about, not just on that scale, but what about all the other industries that are out there? What about people making deals in those industries? And in powerful places in politics, powerful places in technology. So, it's kind of like we jumping down a rabbit hole, but to hell with it. Let's go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, we got
That's
about.
The way I see it, because I really think we need to start paying attention to it.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes more before I'm going to have to talk to you about plugging your website and what you do on YouTube.
Well, I'll try and tell one more, and I'll try and give you the backstory on the guy who was the attorney with the black eyes, because everybody hasn't heard this story. But basically, I'm at Starbucks, and I end up meeting this chick who's I'm talking to people about Dark Waters and the Dark Waters brand. And I end up meeting this Vietnamese young lady who's kind of ear hustling. And ear hustling is somebody who's sitting there listening to your business. And she's like, "Oh, you believe in you believe in the paranormal." So she goes into telling me her story about how she worked as kind of a clerk in a courtroom where she recorded notes and all the rest of the stuff. And she was sitting there and she noticed this very handsome man that was sitting behind the defendant's attorney and like in the rows behind him. And she said he was so handsome that, she couldn't stop looking at him. Like she would say, he was like so fine. She kept on saying he was fine and he was this and he was that. I'm like, okay, I don't want you sitting here telling me how good another man look. Tell me how good I look. I'm just messing with it. We going back and forth. She's like, no, I got to make sure you understand this. So she sees him. She's kind of making googly eyes at him. And then when they take a recess, what she would do is she would go through this side door, go down the hallway, go down a set of steps, and go out into the back and smoke a cigarette. So she goes on her little normal routine where she goes down the hallway, down the steps, and out the back to smoke a cigarette. Now, that back door that she goes out of is you can't get back in it unless you leave it kind of propped open. So she leaves the door propped open to where it's partially open and the lock hasn't latch, because all she got to do is go back up the steps and go straight to the courtroom. If she doesn't, she got to go all the way around the building and come back in through the metal detectors and the whole nine. So she's there smoking, and she starts to hear these kind of footsteps coming down the steps. Then she hears the door open. Then she hears the door close and lock. And so before she turns around, he says, well, do you have another cigarette? She turns around, looks, and it's the guy that she thought was really, really cute. She's like, oh, my God, he's here with me, you know? He's so cute. And she's actually super attractive. I'm not even going to go into that, but she's super attractive. So she's like, oh, my God, it's the guy. And so she's looking for her lighter, and she pulls the lighter out, and she's getting a cigarette. Then when she gives him the cigarette, he likes the cigarette. She turns her back to him for a second because she's trying to figure out what she's going to say. She's nervous like any woman would be when she's around an attractive man. Sidebar note, guys, just so you know, women get nervous too, just like we do. So don't act like little cowards. Go talk to her. Anyway, so she finally musters the strength. She turns to go look at him and talk to him again, and his eyes are black. Not like, not like black people's, but all black eyes. And he's smiling at her. And so she's frozen, standing there, trying to figure out if she's hallucinating or what's going on. And then he blinks both his eyes, and they're black again. And I said, well, what did you do? She said, and this is the funny part. I said, what did you do? And she said, I made the sign of the cross, and I took off running. And she said, I ran all the way around the side of the building, and I ran back up into the front of the courtroom. Ran back into the front of the courthouse, into the metal detectors, ran back all the way back up the steps, and ran back to the courtroom and set my behind back down. Now, here's the freaky part. She sits back down, and people are starting to come back in. He comes back in, sits down again with the regular eyeballs, and just is watching her. Eyes normal, just like they were when she first saw him. But he watches her. She goes back into, after that day's over, she goes back into the little office with the judge and tells the judge what happened. And the judge even said she noticed something was weird about this man. And she's heard things about him being weird or him being into some crazy stuff. So that's the background on that other story I was telling you guys.
Well, I tell you one thing, if you were in court and you're the prosecutor, okay, is looking at you and all of a sudden his eyes go black, I would have a horrible feeling in my gut, not just what's going to be, thrown at me in court, but, that's evil, just straight out evil. So something is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I typically don't talk about that kind of stuff because I don't want none of them people coming looking for me like I heard you was talking about me, homie.
Yeah.
But, I'm at a point now where if you're going to be a coward, then you're going to live life a coward. So I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to tell what I know. And what I know is a lot. So next time you have me on, we'll go into some other stuff that's, insane.
Now, you're going to be on again next month, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, now, how can people find you on YouTube? And do you have a website yet or anything that people can, locate you?
Yeah, so I'm not posting much to YouTube. Everything is going on my website. The website is iamdarkwaters.com. There you can find all my latest stories, my blog, and you can get access to some of the YouTube videos that are still there. All 5 of my albums, which are story albums, which are literally adventures for you to listen to. True stories, but they're adventures. It's not like me just telling a story. It's music, it's sound effects, it's everything. You actually live the story when you hear it. You will be immersed into it and submerge your mind into it. And you can find me on Facebook at DarkH201 and Twitter at DarkH201. If you want to laugh, follow me on Facebook because that's where I really talk all kind of crazy stuff.
Well, I did notice, listening a couple of your things on YouTube, is that you did combine, sound effects and music, and it really, draws you right into it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very high quality production, an extremely high quality production, and it's designed for you to relive that person's encounter, for you to safely relive that person's encounter. That's the whole purpose of it. So when you listen to it, from the moment you turn that